And thank you for joining me in my kitchen today, where I'm going to be making some sunshine pickles. So if you tuned into my recipe about making baby dill pickles, then you already know that I've got some of the larger cucumbers left behind that didn't go into my baby dill recipe, and those I used to make another kind of pickle called sunshine pickles, or also commonly called bread and butter pickles. Now my recipe says that I need to have 50 small cucumbers. Now, how big is a small cucumber is a really good question. This I would say is about 5 inches, something like that. And depending on how large your cucumbers are, you're going to need a few more or a few less. My recipe also calls for 24 small onions. How big is a small onion? Well, I would say probably that size is a small onion, but since most of my onions are bigger than that, I've reduced the number. The ratio of onions to cucumbers is really going to be a personal preference thing, and it might be slightly different for each of you, so that's fine. Now, because I have a food processor, I'm going to use it to slice up my cucumbers and my onions, but certainly if you don't have one, you can slice them by hand. Just think about how thick a bread and butter pickle normally is when you get a jar at the grocery store. You don't want them to be super thin or they're just going to be mushy, and you don't want them to be too thick or it's not really even like eating a pickle. So it's really just, again, an eyeball visual thing, what you'd like them to look like. And then it's just a matter of putting them through the food processor to get them all chopped up. And all I do is I just cut off the ends before I put them in. Okay. Now, the second step of this recipe involves putting some pickling salt on the cucumbers and letting them stand. So as my bowl gets full, I'm just going to dump them into a large Tupperware container so that I've got a spot for them to sit with some salt on. I'm just going to keep chopping these up. Okay, so I've got my giant Tupperware bowl full of raw cucumbers and onions that have been cut for sunshine pickles. And now I'm going to cover them or mix in half a cup of pickling salt. Okay, so by the way, if you don't already own a food processor, I would highly recommend you consider getting one. This made this job infinitely quicker. So it says I've got to combine the pickling salt and the cucumbers and the onions. Really, there's no easy way to stir this much vegetables in a bowl this big. I probably should almost have a bigger bowl, but I don't. So it is what it is. So I'm going to try to get all the way to the bottom with the salt. Okay, so after I get all this salt mixed in, it needs to sit for 1 hour before I do anything else with it. And the whole point of the salt is to draw out all of the liquid from inside the vegetables. So we're just going to mix that in. You don't want to do this with bare hands if you happen to have any cuts on your hands, because the salt will be nasty. Okay, just like that. I'm going to let it sit for an hour, and then I'll be back to do the rest of my recipe. So it's been an hour. My cucumbers have been sitting in the salt, and you can see they've really gone down a lot actually just from sitting with the salt on them, and you can see all the water in here. So my next step is just going to be to do my best to drain as much water off of them as I can without losing too many cucumbers. And if I do lose some into the sink, I'll just grab them. Ah! I guess that's why I started with a clean sink, so I can pick up all the ones that jump. Okay, so I want to get as much water out of there as I can. Hold on. I've yet to figure out an easier way to do this. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, now I'm just going to pick up all my jumpers. Now I'm just going to let that set to the side for a minute. I've got my cucumbers that are drained. And then my recipe calls for 4 cups of vinegar. And it's just plain white vinegar, 4 cups. And 4 cups of white sugar as well. So I put that in my pot. And my sugar. And 4. To which I am going to add half a teaspoon of turmeric and 2 teaspoons of celery seed. Now what I'm going to do after I get this all measured out into here is I'm actually going to bring this to a boil on my stove. And once it's boiling, I'm going to add in my raw cucumbers and onions. and let it simmer for about 3 or 4 minutes to get everything heated through. And then while that mixture is really hot, I'm going to put it into jars and put on my lids. So my jars are sterilized. I'm going to fill them with the pickles and the brine that's hot on the stove. I'm going to put them on their sealing lids and seal them shut, and they should seal themselves just like that because the liquid going in is hot, the jars are warm, the lids are warm, and that's all I'm going to need to do. So with this pickle, I don't have to put them in my canner and seal them like I do with my baby dill pickles. So it's actually a little bit quicker, even though you have to let them sit for an hour. In the long run, it seems to be that it's a little bit quicker method of making pickles. So I'm just going to put this on my stove and get my brine boiling. We've got our brine and seasoning mixture here at a complete full boil. It's boiling like crazy, which is perfect because we now want to add our raw cucumbers and onions to this mix, and we're going to simmer it for about 3 or 4 minutes. So I just want to add them in. Try not to spill too many. It's a big bucket, so it's hard to get them all in there. And the little bit of residual water and salt that's left in those, even after we drain them, becomes part of the brine. Okay. Yeah. Oh my, this is a very full pot. Lots of pickles. Okay. Now I'm just going to mix them in here. It's going to take a little bit of work to get them all down to the bottom of there. And it says to simmer for 3 to 4 minutes. So I actually probably should have a little bit more vinegar and a little bit more sugar for this mixture because it's, oh, I dropped one. Put that back in there. There's hardly enough liquid in here. I have maybe a few extra cucumbers than I should have. We're just going to let it cook for a minute, see how it turns out. Now, I do have to make sure this is really hot all the way through because I'm not going to pan my jars after I get this cucumber mixture into them. So what my next steps kind of get a little bit busy because I have my warm jars in the oven and I'm just keeping them warm on a really low temperature. They're in there at 200. I've got my rings sitting here in boiling water, my sealing lids. And all I really do at this point is I put my hot liquid into a warm jar with a warm lid on top of it and I let it seal. And that's it. It means I don't need to put them into the canner, which is kind of a nice thing. It makes for a little bit quicker. And as this sits here and simmers, you can see the pickles are going down into the juice. And it looks like I am going to have enough vinegar and sugar in this mixture. I always doubt this recipe. It seems like a lot of cucumbers for the juice, but once you get it cooking and a little bit more of the water comes out of the vegetables, all of a sudden you have enough brine for them. Okay, I can tell by stirring this that my mixture is just about ready to start boiling again. And I don't really want it to boil. I don't want to boil my cucumbers. I just want to get them hot enough. So I'm just going to turn my burner off. And this is where it starts to be a bit tricky work because I got to get those hot jars out of the oven, line them up here, get them filled with this hot liquid, and get these hot lids on them as quickly as possible. So I'm not going to lie, it usually gets a little messy, a little sticky, but I do my best to make sure. One thing you have to really be careful of is once you fill your jar, you don't want to have anything on the rim of the jar when you go to put your lid on or your jar won't seal, okay? So I'm going to be wiping and cleaning and doing my best to get this done quick here. So. You ready? Here we go. So good. Here, 3. One thing that I definitely find helps with filling the jars is to get a wide canning funnel like that. Okay. Give this one more little stir here. And I'm just going to fill my jars. Don't want to get too much. Don't want to overfill. Okay, next one. Uh-oh. Get in there. Yeah, my stove is going to be a very sticky mess after this. Just a little more juice. There we go. Okay. So, I'm just going to show you the first 4 here. I'm going to give them a quick wipe. And these jars are warm because you got to remember they came out of the oven a second ago and I just put an almost boiling liquid inside of them, so be careful you don't burn yourself. And I'm gonna get my lids out of here. So these are just lids in boiling water, just the snap lids, okay? Awesome, and then I just put my rings on. I can't hold that jar, it's too hot. Silicone oven mitts are fantastic for working with pickles because you can just, if you really need to, you can throw them in the dishwasher afterwards. Fantastic. And there you have it, 4 jars of Sunshine Pickles ready to go. They need, just like the baby dills, these need to go to your basement for 3 to 4 weeks before you can bring them up and enjoy them. But other than getting them in the jars, they are ready to be stored for the winter. So I'm going to continue working here. I hope that if you learned a trick or two, you'll subscribe to my channel. And I'd love to hear any questions or comments you have in the remarks below. Thanks so much. Bye for now.